Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope all is well. Tonight's Dogman encounter brings us to Hancock County, West Virginia, back in 2002. I'm a 32-year-old lady from the very northern tip of West Virginia. Most of my life has been lived in Hancock County. When I was little, we camped in tents, walked everywhere, hiked at parks, all that outside goodness. In my teens, we started going to state parks to ride horses. I've been to Tomlinson Run, Beaver Creek State Park, Salt Fork, Raccoon Creek, and Vista Park. I think that was the name of it. We had a friend who was constantly inviting us to ride on people's land she had received permission from. Well, I'm pretty well acquainted with the local wildlife, and I've seen all the major players, including coy dog and bear, and can identify most sounds in the forest. I love watching nature documentaries. I was looking to become a vet, so I studied a lot on animals. Drawing and painting them got me very acquainted with animal anatomy. Was I ever into cryptozoology? Yeah, I was. I was a dino-crazy little girl. My one babysitter had Reader's Digest, Mysteries of the Unexplained. The thought of a plesiosaur in Scotland or a patasaurus in the Congo was just mind-blowing. Later in life, I started looking at it like folklore. It was interesting to read the accounts and learn the theories behind what people were seeing, but I believed in them as much as a folklorist believes in dragons and trolls. I don't have any interest in Bigfoot, and I've never heard of a Dogman. Never had interest in looking, nor did the thoughts ever cross my mind. It seems I didn't need to go looking, they found me. We moved to a farm when I was about 10. Mom's dream was to have horses, and she was finally able to live it. The farmhouse was haunted, mainly by the former residents of the house. I never felt threatened by them, though it was a little unnerving to have two men talking and moving the couch you were sitting on. Or, should I say, it sounded like it. No one was home, no media was on, and yet I was hearing two men talking about how they were going to move the couch and where, and the sound of the furniture being dragged right from under me. The land itself had its share of strangeness. Most things were benign, though. We just shrugged and carried on. I honestly hated our woods. Anywhere else, I'd freely hike, but even in the yard, sometimes I felt watched. Heck, sometimes I thought something was staring in our windows. Now that I think of it, we did have things slam into our trailer. I think it was one of the horses that had gotten loose, but when I'd go outside to investigate, I'd find nothing. I'd just chalk it up to a deer. I used my horses' breeds for their names rather than think of names for them. Anyone who knows me knows my horses' names. I was 18 to 19 in this encounter. By this time, we had given up on cows. I hate them. And just had horses and chickens. Someone knocked on the door at 2 a.m. I'd only been asleep 2 hours, but years of conditioning had my heart pumping and my mind clearing. Someone knocking that early meant trouble. It usually meant horses or livestock had gotten out. I wasn't disappointed. Our neighbor said the horses were in his yard. My mind wasn't totally awake, so I didn't think to ask which yard they were in. My stepfather came out and asked, "What's up?" and told me they were my horses, so deal with it. Mom was working, that was nothing new. This lot of horses had 3 expert escape artists. I had the routine down. It was pretty dark out, but I did have some moonlight to help. The security light only went so far, then of course it shut off after so long. When it was cloudy, you literally had to watch that you didn't walk off into the ravine. It was so pitch black. I was naturally in a foul mood, cursing my horses and wondering if some drunk had gone through the fence again. It happens a lot. As I got closer to the brown barn, I realized the horse was flipping out. It was running back and forth, squealing and carrying on. I went in and grabbed the halters and leads. I paused for a moment to see if any other horse or horses had replied to the horse I heard squeal. That would give me an idea where the other horse or horses might be. There was no reply. That was odd. I was thinking, crap, they're on the other side of the hill. It was the only reason in my mind they wouldn't be replying. Let's just say when they followed our cut trails to the other side, it took us an hour to traverse through the woods and lead them back. And even with 2 guys on a 4-wheeler and my mom, that was a freaky trek. I felt like I was being watched and followed. Maybe it wasn't paranoia. So, the land is set up like this. The brown barn was connected to a small pasture about half an acre long, which then connects to a 7-acre pasture. Pretty much in the center, on the outside edge of the large pasture, was an old white barn that we had turned into a run-in. I decided to tackle the horse still in the fence so I could bring her down to the small pasture to keep her from escaping also. Maybe the others would follow. I had to walk clear to the other side of the pasture to get to the panicking horse. It was my mother's psycho Appaloosa mare. I tried to catch her and nearly got trampled. A few times trying. She was frothing at the mouth and her eyes were white. Were really showing I was alarmed and no, as I said, psycho. I noticed my other 6 were across the road. They were standing in a tiny little fenced-in area under the spotlight. They were standing motionless and not touching a blade of grass. I was wondering how the neighbor managed to herd them all into that tiny fenced area with that tiny door. 3 of those horses were over 16 hands tall. One was a draft horse cross. The doorway was actually small enough. He touched both sides going through. My thoroughbred mare took me 2 hours to corral the last time she got out, much to my frustration. She was an awesome jumper. So, a stranger rounding them up and putting them into that tiny yard was mind-blowing. I've had horses since I was 9. I'm 32 now. I've had ponies and horses. I've had Appaloosas, Arabians, draft horses, quarter horses, walking horses, saddlebreds, thoroughbreds, Mustangs, foals, geldings, mares, and geldings that still thought they were stallions. I've had a lot of horses from all walks of life. I will tell you, they consistently do not like to be crammed into tight spaces, especially not in a group. I had 2 severely abused horses I was rehabbing, a thoroughbred that actually had PTSD and a raking horse that actually took me 3 years to touch without some sort of bad reaction. They did not like being in stalls, and all but 1 were mares. Mares are extremely moody, and 2 of mine were particularly vicious to those who they didn't like. My walker mare only liked 3 other horses. She should have kicked the crap out of these others in there. Mine also didn't like to be under lights when they had escaped. They avoided them like the plague. And not eating grass that was over ankle deep? That's unheard of. They were still and silent, dead still, dead silent. My neighbor came out and told me that they were like that when he found them. He asked me if I needed help, but I said no, my thoroughbred and raking horses did not like men. I told him I'd take them out one at a time. I took 1 halter and lead and threw the rest outside the gate. I put the halter on my gelding and opened the gate to lead him out. They had other plans, though. All 6 came out as a freaking unit. They were literally chest to butt crammed together. My gelding and my Welsh mare had their chests pushing against me as we walked back to the brown barn. Normally, they did not want to do this. I wouldn't usually allow such bad behavior. We were on the main road, which I did not like. The speed limit is only 35, but people go 60. So I tried to lead them through the large pasture gate. They wouldn't even go on that side of the road, though. I was a little unnerved by their behavior, so I led them down to the brown barn and they went in. They were skittish, though, picking at the hay I threw out, walking around restlessly, sticking to the barn like glue, and eyeing the upper pasture. I rationalized it by thinking, it's a Appy flipping out. That's unnerving them. And why hadn't she come down yet? She had to have seen us all walk down. I rushed to the gate between the little and big pastures out of habit. I didn't want the herd to go back out until the big pasture. I didn't have to worry. They didn't follow me like they usually did. The gate was wide open, but the Appy was still running and squealing back and forth in the same area. I started to go get her. Now, the neighbor's security lights didn't really light up my pasture. The road was higher than my pasture, so it cast in a shadow. I could make out her shape in some detail, though. She took off at a panicked gallop, swerved sideways, and jumped the stream. When she landed, she nearly landed on her face. She caught herself, though, and took off at a dead gallop again. I ducked behind a stump. If she would have hit me, I would have been dead. I went back to the gate, and decided to forego looking her over until I got the halters and leads. She was too hot at the moment. I decided to walk on the road instead of through the pasture again. The pasture was uneven, unlit, and full of springs. Sometime during this, clouds had taken over the sky, so there was no more moonlight to see by. The spot on the road where I was at was paved and pretty well lit, though. My neighbor was paranoid, as I mentioned. I had almost gotten to the white barn when I got this sudden urge to stop and look at a very specific spot in the pasture. I would like to say it is instinct that told me to look, but usually I'd scan the woods first to see what was watching me. That's usually where the watchers are. Instead, I just flicked on my flashlight right on a certain spot. It was extremely close to where the mare was flipping out. I saw red eyes shine. My first thought was, why in the world would a deer be there with all of that chaos? I was feeling the sense of extreme dread and didn't know why. Besides, it being where my horses were going nuts told me something else wasn't just right. I then realized where the eyes were relative to the walnut trees and my racing barrels. See, the road is above the pasture and the walnut trees were right at the same elevation of the road. The pasture itself is sloped, and to deal with the runoff from the road, the barrel is next to it. It was on the low end of the incline. The barrels were white, so I could see them in the dim lighting from the flashlight. On the one it was next to, this thing was too freaking big to be a deer. I was frozen, standing there watching it. I just had this feeling it was evil and that I had to keep track of those eyes. It was watching me. I slowly blinked a few times. It also looked over into the woods above the pasture. I know what you're going to ask. If I ever feel that there's anyone out there, well, let me tell you, it's crossed my mind. With a sinking stomach, I flashed my flashlight over the woods to see if I would catch eyeshine. I didn't see any though, so I went right back to the eyes. They were still there. I flicked back and forth, making sure nothing was sneaking up on me. I didn't know how long I stood there watching, frozen. Someone could have come around in the bend and hit me with their car. I was so focused. Finally, it started to move off. I glanced at me, sideways a few times, only one eye. I think it went into the copse of trees around the creek. I heard nothing. That wasn't surprising, though. The horses were still restless and making sounds. I stood there a long time. After looking for the eyeshine, I was wondering if it could have been a bear. I didn't think so, though. The eyes were consistent in height until it disappeared. Bears are clumsy on their back legs on this uneven inclined ground. I have no doubt a bear would have dropped to the ground and been to all fours. Even at the rear up down behavior bears do when they were trying to see something wouldn't work. We had one cross our pasture before. He made a lot of noise going through the woods. The horses settled down quicker with the bear. I almost was at my neighbor's at this point. I considered leaving the couple $100 of tack at my house. The halters and leads aren't cheap. I had no doubt if I left them, they'd be gone in the morning. My mother would be pissed, so I darted over, grabbed them, and ran like a bat out of hell. I know. I should have just left the tack. I also know you're not supposed to run, but I couldn't even conceive what I had just seen. I got into the barn, threw the tack down, and hung with the horses. I wasn't going to go back up that pitch black driveway anymore on foot. I figured with the horses I'd have a warning, and the barn had plenty of sharp things. I didn't go back up until dawn. I was frozen stiff by the time. I've had years to think this over, and it nerves the crap out of me. How long was this thing there? Was that what was keeping the Appy mare from coming down? Was it right there in the shadows while I was trying to catch her? Or was it in the unlit barn I had just walked through to get to the road? Was it the reason the Appy swerved and nearly fell? How did my horses get out? I never did find how they got out. Did they panic and jump the fence? I did check the fence line away from the woods. I did look for tracks around the barrel. Sadly, the ground was hard from the frost that morning. But I will say the Appy mare was running for a good while. The ground was severely torn up and turned into a muddy mess. It was high noon when I went down there to check, and the ground had melted. I'll bet it was her that woke up the neighbor. It took them about a week to finally settle. I don't know if whatever it was is still in the area or if they're just traumatized. It wasn't too long after that my mother filed for divorce. My ex-stepfather got the farm and I moved in with her in the city. Even with all the weird crap going on up there, there were non-bipedal things going on either. I miss it terribly. Maybe it's more accurate to say I miss the farm life rather than the actual place. I'd love to get back into farming again, but I'd probably hesitate to move back there. I never told anyone about the eyeshine event. I didn't see the actual creature, and really, how do you convey the unnatural horror induced in your fear. You saw the eye shine, whoop-de-doo, my mother had given me a benefit of the doubt, but my mother often told family members things. They made my life enough of a living hell. I didn't want to give them any more ammo.